Hi, everybody. I'm going to show you the solution to June 2019. I'm just going to go over and give you a few tips on the calculation techniques. Feel free to skip around if you want to and ask questions at the end of the video so that I can try to answer them. All right, let's get started. So in this section, the first one is an observational study because you're just collecting surveillance and you're just looking at records. So because of that, you're just observing. So just 3. The second one, if you expand it out, either by doing the Pascal's triangle or by multiplying it out. The first one is very easy because we've done this so many times. That expands out to x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. Knowing that the first one doesn't work out implies that choice 1 and choice 3 are out, and so you have to test whether 3 is right, and this is not going to be right because 3 plus 1 means that you have to have 4 terms and they only have 3 terms, so this is also out. And so you can see that from here, this expansion, or you can multiply it out. Another suggestion is to put in your calculator and try like substituting for some values, like I did here. I think my computer is really hot, so when it gets to this point, it starts to spaz on me. So that's what you're seeing right now. Anyways, let me just color code in case you didn't know where I was substituting. So that's pretty much what I was substituting. Anyways, the next one, so there's several ways. I like to do it algebraically by setting them equal to each other and solve. But when you manipulate it, you're going to get 0 and -5. Substitute it back in there and you get these coordinates. So it's choice 3. You can, if you run out of time, just put this into y1 and y2 and then see which one equals. So that's one option. Moving on to the next one, I remember grading this question. So I did this wherever the year was. Because every year I go grade, and I love to grade because I get to meet other teachers and talk about things from all over the city. And I remember this question, like most of us got this wrong. Like I think notoriously every kid who got this question wrong. But basically, you had to think about it a little bit more. So think about the concept of speed, which is the ratio of distance over time. And if you increase, so what's happening is that Irma is running this 1 mile, like that doesn't change. So the distance is the same, but what's changing is her time. So overall, as her time is decreasing, her speed must be increasing. So so that's what they're saying. As like the 1 mile speed increases, it's because the number of weeks, as like the number of weeks are increasing, right? Like it's going up, her speed is decreasing because the 1 mile thing is going down in time, and it's a time in minutes. So that was the key concept there. Very, very sneaky of the writers. The next one, the initial is 85,000. So you had to do this, but you had to find, no, I think they give you all the information. You just have to plug it in, and when you calculate it, it's 4. This one is definitely okay. So I would do a table value. There's several ways you could do this. Either a table value and see that you're doubling, but because you're doubling and you start with 5, so 5 would be your A value, 2 is your base, but it's only every 2 years. So it will be x divided by 2, because every 2 years you just multiply by 1, 2, you don't multiply like 2 to the second power. Now, if you're not sure, what you could do is, again, type it into your calculator. And when you type in the calculator, calculator is going to give this equation. And then you just have to know that 2 to the 1/2 is that same base. So that's that. The next one, you just type in 1 and -1 into the calculator. So I would put this into the function. And whichever one gave you a 0 is the factor theorem. So by the factor theorem, x minus 1 is a factor of the polynomial. So the correct answer is choice 4. All of them have this outcome, right? So you just have to see which one is the same. All of them are the same except for the first one, which reduces to x cubed. Okay, so the inverse of the function is where you switch x, solve for y, and replace it with f inverse. So you get choice 2. Other things that you could do is graph this into y1, and then graph. Let me see if I can show you, like, if you're not sure, remember in unit 2, we said that this is y equals, so 4x plus 5, you graph x, and then if you graph the correct one, I'm just gonna do, because I know that one is just clear, is just x minus 5 divided by 4, right? Yeah, if you see like the symmetry over the red line, that is the answer. My window is not, I wonder if I could do zoom fit, which is 0. Yeah, that's a better fit. Now is it the red line? I feel like that's not correct. It should be the red line. 4x plus 5. Let me just quickly look and see where I went wrong. X minus 5 divided by 4. For some reason, it doesn't look correct, unless I made a mistake. Or maybe it's zoomed out, so you don't see it. But I'm pretty sure that's the answer. X minus 5 divided by 4. Okay. 4x plus 5, x, and then let me type in x divided by 4, and then minus 5 divided by 4. That's interesting. Look at the table values. 9. So if I go to 9, I should see 1. Yep, I do see 1. 9, 1. Yeah, it works. I think it's just the way the graph is. Okay. Yeah, I think it's the way the graph is calibrated. But anyways. This one, it's just the keywords. A geometric is where you're being multiplied. So you're looking for which one you're multiplying. Every scenario is a plus because it says like you're adding or you're subtracting. So the only one that's multiplication is the third one because you're multiplying by 1.05. The second one is a factor by grouping. You're just grouping these two terms. And when you factor by grouping, you factor out n squared minus 9, and then factor this trinomial and factor that into two binomials. And so the correct answer is choice 2. All right, so techniques. You can use your calculator to check. I don't know if you know this. And I used to tell my students this. Especially for Algebra 1, like if they want to just double check their answer, you're pretty much using the factor theorem. So let's say you're not too sure and it's just time is getting tight. So then what you could do, plus 108, you go to graph and you look at the zeros. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So that means that there are 4 answers. What you could do is go to ask and type in like, okay, so number 2 is correct. So if I type in -3, 3, -6, and 2, they should all say zeros, right? But let's say you thought it was choice 3, then not a problem. Just type in 3. Ooh, but you know what? Choice 3 is they repeat, so yeah, that's an interesting one, because how do you know if you have a multiplicity of 1 or a multiplicity of 2? So it could be 2 or 3. I could see how people get this one wrong. All right, so there is limitations on like when you use a calculator. There is. So this is why we rely on the algebraic breakdown. So that would be my go-to. I would factor out the W, this is the GCF, and then set x squared plus 1 equal to 0 and solve to get plus and minus I. Statistics. For statistics, again, this is like the margin of error. The margin of error is just, we don't have to calculate this at all. It's just x bar plus and minus 2, the standard deviation, and they already tell you the mean and the standard deviation. So you just put in your calculator. So that means that your interval is 0.134 to 0.374. And we're going to use round brackets. For this one, they're equal when the x value has the same output. So 8.52 have the same output. So the correct answer is number 4. Number 15, you just expand it out, multiply it out, and when you simplify, you get this answer over here, which is choice 1. I'm pretty sure you could use your test function on your calculator to verify that, but it doesn't work on mine. The next one, you actually have to create the correct equation. So my advice to you is that if you have the correct equation, then by all means, you can use your calculator and just verify, right? Type in 10 and -2, and if the y1 and y2 are equal, that's your answer. So we're going to type in like the other answers that are wrong. So those are, oh, since you know 2 is wrong, then you can eliminate some. But the idea is to multiply everything by n to get a quadratic, set it equal to 0, factor, and then solve. And then of course, check your answer on the calculator. For this one, this is anytime, so this is, remember that lesson about compound interest and PERT. Once it becomes continuous, the function starts approaching like a PERT equation. So as x, so here's a main idea. The main idea is as Sn approaches to infinity, the formula A equals P times 1 plus Rn, R over N to the Nt power approaches to PERT. So the correct answer is choice 2. Moving on to number 18. This is since you know 2 standard deviation is about 0.95, you can just do 400 times 0.95 to give you about 380. For number 19, you square both sides, set it equal to 0, get a and -8, and then of course check your answer. I eyeballed it and I knew that this was rejected because square root of anything, right, it's not going to equal a negative number. So choice 1 and choice 3 are out. So you just have to check 8 and see if you have to reject that, because then there will be choice 4. Other alternative is just to put in your calculator and see which one equals. An exponential relationship is where you're multiplying by a constant factor. So choice 1. And I wrote here like the second one is a linear because you're adding by 1. And even though the y value you're adding by 4, it just means that your slope is going to be 1/4. Well, -1/4 because the x value is subtracting, and this ones are squares and these are cubics. Okay, so this was I don't remember if you remember this questions from the multiplicity unit. For the polynomial unit, whenever you have a bounce, there's a second degree. So just by knowing that, you already know that choice 3 is the answer. I mean choice 4. But anyways, I broke it down. We're like, okay, this has a multiplicity, it has an odd multiplicity, and this one has as a odd multiplicity. Since it's a W shape, you know that the degree has to be 4. So other things that you could have like eliminated was 1, and 3, because these are cubic. And this thing here is a like quartic for sure. So these are quartic. So that's one thing. Moving on to the next one. So a sine graph. So when you read carefully, it says that it's the number after midnight. So 7 p.m. if you count military time. So midnight, 1, 2, 3, up until you get 12. So then 1 p.m. by the afternoon, 1 p.m. is 13. So I would just count 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So that means 7 p.m. it's going to be x equals 19. And when you put it into the calculator, you get about 77. So the correct answer is choice 3. 23, if you haven't watched in the previous videos, you can use, I think I would recommend the row echelon form, the one that Swan had mentioned. And then you just type it in the calculator. You know, I remember some students showing me this in the past, but I don't know why. Now that I think about it, I think this is a great technique. If I were to redo this again, I might just use this to check for multiple choice and just encourage kids. Like if you have a multiple choice question, then just use, the row ref form. But use the other one for the short response because you can get full credit. Again, these kind of question friends, like if you don't know the deal by now, it's really like whichever one has the same equation. So you just go on your calculator and you just type in 1.0011121184. Oh, I gotta quit because I'm in the wrong table. Let me just, okay. 1.0011121184 raised to the 52, and whichever one gives you that base of 1.06, that's the answer. Because what they want, friends, is like they want the same equations. You just want to change the way it looks. So that's like the theme of rewriting those exponential bases. But if you remember in class, what we did in class was that we set the base m equal to 1.06, change the 1 year into 52 weeks, and then take the 52 root of both sides. All right, so now the short response. So the short response is like you have to know your days. So January to January to April is 1 to 4. So you have to do f of 4 minus f of 1 divided by 4 minus 1. Unfortunately for you, they give you everything and you just have to simplify to 1.5 hours of daylight over 1 month. Friends, if you don't know what unit to put, you don't have to put it. You won't get points off. But I do encourage you because in the next one, it says explain the meaning and the context. And I think having the unit there, anytime you have an average rate of change, that's slope. And slope is always a comparison between two things. And if you don't know, what goes on top is the y, the unit in the dependent value, and the denominator is the unit in the independent value. So it's like your x. And if it's a positive, you have to mention the word increases. Okay, so what are the keywords that we want to hear in your writing? We want to hear this average rate of change of 1.5 means that on average, so we need to hear that word, on average, the numbers of hours of daylight increases about 1.5 per month from January 1st to April 1st. Okay, like this part right here is important. Okay. And the reason is because it's an average, okay? And it only increases 1.5 between January 1st and April 1st, no other time. Like if you talk to me about December, October to December, that's going to be a different average, okay? All right, so the second one, 26. 26, I would find the LCM, which is 4x times x plus 1, multiply everything by 4x plus 1 so that you can go out of the rational world and into this quadratic world. So you can set it equal to 0, factor, and find 7 and -2. And that's it. There's only one variable here, so you just need to find x's. If it's x and y, you have to put both of them down together in an ordered pair, okay? You don't have to show your check. I just showed it on my calculator and that's okay. But do check your work, friends, because this is Algebra 2. There's always going to be extraneous solutions. This one, a couple of things about this. Set the argument equal to 0 to find your vertical asymptote, which is located at -6, and it should be a dashed line. Please do not draw solid lines. The domain is going to be x plus 6 greater than 0. You set the argument greater than 0 so that you know that x is greater than -6. And then when you go on your calculator, it makes sense. And just copy all the integral ones that you can plot those points because those are the ones that we're going to be looking for. And they don't ask a domain. So this should be done in pencil. There should be arrows. And many of you on the exam, you forgot to extend it. Remember, there's a vertical asymptote. So that means the function approaches that vertical line, but it doesn't hit it. Okay. So make sure to extend your line and get closer and closer. And it should also pass the vertical line test. It shouldn't be straight. Okay. Moving on. So tangent. So if this terminates in quadrant 3, so you're going to draw a right triangle in quadrant 3, and it should be with respect to the x-axis. And tangent of this theta is going to be opposite, which is -7, over adjacent, which is -24. And the reason why both of them are negative is because the x value is negative and so is the y value. Using your Pythagorean theorem, you can calculate that the hypotenuse is 25, and then the cosine is just adjacent, which is the -24 over the hypotenuse, which is 25, and that's it. Now, if you put in the sign on your right triangle, like I mentioned in class, that will keep track of your sign because cosine is negative in quadrant 3. So when you get a negative answer, like that should make sense because cosine is negative in that quadrant. All right, Kenzie believes anytime they have this, they want you to prove it. And so when you manipulate it, right, you're going to get that this is actually the 35th root of x to the 31 power. And so she made a mistake here. Now, this is justified algebraically. Is she correct? So you do have to, for the next point, write, no, Kenzie is not correct. they don't say to explain. So if you wrote no, she's not correct and left it at that and show this, you would get full credit. But I like to explain it because I like to be extra, because, and you can say that this is equivalent to the 35th root of x to the 31st, not the 31st root of x to the 6th power. So when you multiply this, so the first thing you have to do is set up the equation. I realize that this is a little messy, so why don't I move this down so that you could see what the original equation is. So the original equation is this piece without all that fluff. So I'm just gonna copy and paste it because I like the color to like keep track of like what's what. So that's the original equation, and p of x divided by x minus 1 equals x squared plus 7 plus 5 over x minus 1. And if you're finding p of x, you just multiply everything by x minus 1. The one thing that you have to be mindful of is that don't distribute that x minus 1 in that last term, because these two things cancel out, which is what some of you did. And then, of course, don't forget to add your constant, because it did say in standard form. I would get so irked if, you know, like you're like almost there, but you don't go all the way. And this is a 2-point question. So please make sure to check over your work. Okay, a recursive formula. I can't say this enough. A recursive formula requires 2 equations, one for the starting and the second one for the rule. So you're going to say A1 equals 6, right? Because this is A1. And then a sub n is equal to, the rule is to multiply 1.5. So you say, okay, 1.5 times a sub n minus 1. All right, that's our notation for previous terms. So make sure to do that. Showing work, this little piece of work that I did, try to calculate what r is enough work. And that's it for your 2 pointers. All right, so I don't know if you've noticed this, but like on 3 exams at this point, it's always the margin of error that they test for. So make sure you know the marginal error, and I'm so glad I taught it to you. It was our last lesson. The marginal error is double the standard deviation, and on the Regents, they will always give you the mean and the standard deviation. So you're going to say, okay, well, the mean is 0.499 and the standard deviation, double it, and then you add and subtract. So this is your 95% interval, your 95% confidence interval. And Robin has a 0.43. Since this value is within this interval, her coin's not unusual. However, if it was outside of it, it would be, okay? So you're going to say no. So I provided my evidence, and now you're going to say, no, the results of the simulation does not provide a strong evidence that Robin's coin is unfair, because her result, 0.43, falls within the interval. All right, 30, so now we're getting to the 4 pointers. In this question, I thought this was a really easy factoring technique. You just use dots twice. You use dots to go from quartic to quadratics, and then another one to go into linear, and that's it. So that's 2 points up here. Then you set them all equal to 0, and this one will have imaginary roots. So you're going to say no, and now it says explain, so you have to explain. My nose is really itchy. I don't know why. No, Sarah is not correct, because 2 of the 4 roots are imaginary. The roots are plus or minus 3 over 2 and plus or minus 3i over 2, where only the first 2, the plus or minus 3 over 2, are real roots. Or you could say like, oh, she has imaginary roots, which are plus or minus 3i over 2. Half-life. So there is a generic form, which is ab to the t over n power. Your initial amount is 200, your base is 1/2, and your every year that it decreases by 1/2 is 15. Then what the question wants you to do is to set this equal to 1/10 of 200, which is 20. That's key. But if you isolate the base, you realize that you get back to the 110 as earlier, and that should make sense. So what you could do is just set the 1/2, like that part without the a value, to 1/10, and then convert it into exponential so that you can solve for t, and then multiply both sides by 15, and then it's about 50 years on your calculator. You could do on your calculator, there's so many ways to do this. Either you do the change of base. So I'm just going to go over here. You can do 15 log of 1 divided by 10 divided by log of 1 divided by 2. Or you can go to 15 math, and you go and you do that 0.5 and then 0.1, and you get to the same place. I just typed it in wrong, so maybe I don't do that. I got it right now. Okay, always check, dude. Always check. Okay, the next one, directress. Honestly, I like to draw a picture. So the directress at y equals -5, and the vertex, the focus is 4, -1. So the vertex must be 4, -3, and this must be your p's. So the equation is y equals 1/4p times x minus h all squared plus k. When you substitute this in, you get 1/8 x minus 4 squared minus 3. I always encourage you to calculate the totals of the row and the columns, and just make sure that it equals 2045, because most often than not, they want you to use it, and you do in this question. So this is asking about conditional probability. What's the probability that, given that it was a long practice, that Felipe wins? Okay, well, he has to have win and done long time practice, which is 12. So that's the intersection divided by the long-term practice. So that's 12/24. And then it says, are they independent? And so if you remember the independent rule, you already calculate the first part, the W given L, right? So you have to see if that's equivalent to the probability of win. And the probability of win is 22/45. And you use the decimal values. So you would say, no, they're not equal. So they're not independent, they're dependent. The last question is a trig question. Okay. I like to say like, oh, that's interesting. So now we know sometimes it's a trig question that's a 6-pointer. Sometimes it's a rational equation. Remember that medical problem? It's a rational equation or logarithmic. So you never know. So be ready. So for the first part, I think this is 1 point. You just had to write what 2.5. You didn't have to do this. This I was just writing for you guys. But then guess what? The next part asks, what does it mean in the context of the problem, right? So what it means is that the period 2.5 represents that the wheel will make 1 revolution every 2.5 seconds. Okay, so that's the keyword that we're trying to listen. And then the last one is where you graph them. So a couple of things is that this is cosine, so it's min 0, max 0, min. And that the period is 2.5. And if you divide by 4, you get 0.625. Because they only want 1 complete cycle, you can cut up the graph this way. Please spread your graph out and not too close to the grid. The midline is 13. Your y max is 26 because it's of 13 plus 13. And your y min is 13 minus 13. You do the midline, which is 13, and the amplitude is the absolute value. So that means how low it goes is 0 and how high it goes is 26. Make sure you're in radians, and if not, you can always ask your calculator. So I just asked my calculator, and these are the points that it gave us. And then of course it says, does it ever reach above 30? No, because the highest it reaches is 26. So you could say, no, the height of the nail never reached 30 inches above the ground because the maximum height the nail ever reached is 26 inches above the ground. And that's it. All right, so I hope this was helpful, and happy studying, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye, everybody.